In Singapore, there are people living in houses they do not own, who have stayed for so many years they know every neighbor and routine. They have stayed so long they forgot one crucial fact: the house was never theirs. This creates a mental state called psychological ownership. It is the creeping shift where a long-term occupant develops a false sense of entitlement to a home they are only renting. Landlords often operate under the illusion of control. They assume that because their name is on the title deed, they hold the power, believing they can simply ask a difficult occupant to leave at any time. The legal reality in Singapore tells a different story. You cannot legally remove a tenant overnight. If they have occupied the unit long-term or possess any form of written agreement, an eviction can quickly spiral into a complex, months-long dispute. This dynamic becomes dangerous for elderly landlords. As an owner's health or cognitive sharpness declines, their ability to enforce boundaries weakens, making them prime targets for occupants looking to exploit the living arrangement. These occupants weaponize the situation by refusing to communicate, intentionally creating friction, and even calling the police on the rightful landlord to delay regaining control. Many owners rely on informal, trust-based arrangements, thinking it buys them loyalty. In reality, operating without strict boundaries slowly strips the operational power away from the rightful owner and hands it to the occupant. This timeline tracks the shifting power. At year 1, the dynamic is balanced. By year 5, the tenant subtly erodes boundaries. By year 10, they settle into total entitlement, dictating terms and acting like the true owner. This is the opportunistic phase. Taking advantage of an elderly landlord's declining condition, some occupants will draft agreements themselves. These documents are explicitly designed to favor the tenant's continued stay, while stripping away standard protections for the owner. They often deliberately rush the signature process, heavily pressing a vulnerable, confused owner to sign the papers quickly, without any proper legal review. This locks in biased terms, while critical landlord protections are conveniently left out of the documentation. Nightmare tenants don't appear overnight. They result from years of unchecked boundary erosion, enabled by informal structures. Identifying these vulnerabilities starts with a look at the most dangerous omission: operating purely on verbal trust. Without a formal tenancy agreement, there is no structure to the arrangement. This leaves the landlord with zero legal protection. There are no enforceable terms for property maintenance, and crucially, no clearly defined exit strategy to legally remove the occupant when conflict arises. A separate failure occurs when owners do not collect identification records, like an NRIC or FIN. NRIC is the National Registration Identity Card for citizens and permanent residents, while FIN is the Foreign Identification Number for long-term pass holders. Missing these specific, crucial identification records completely destroys your legal traceability. If a dispute escalates, the landlord lacks the basic verification needed to hold the occupant legally accountable. Subtle behavioral shifts also signal a loss of control. An occupant might casually claim, "The home is basically theirs," while actively avoiding lease discussions and resisting any property communication. This type of resistance often spreads far beyond just the landlord. Frequent disputes with neighbors or co-tenants indicate that the occupant's hostility is escalating into a wider conflict within the community. Failing to clearly enforce documentation and boundaries is a complete surrender of authority. It effectively hands over the keys, the daily decision-making, and the total operational control of your property to a complete stranger. The true cost extends far past unpaid rent. Massive hidden costs include legal eviction fees and extensive repair expenses. Emotional and opportunity costs are equally severe. The property becomes frozen. You cannot sell or re-rent it while a hostile occupant is in place. To prevent this, owners must implement a properly structured tenancy framework from day one. This requires specific, legally binding exit clauses that protect the landlord's position, rather than relying on generic templates found online. Thorough professional tenant screening is mandatory. You must verify employment and conduct background checks, and evaluate their behavior during the viewing phase before handing over any keys. If your family has an elderly or vulnerable member who owns property, you should put formal legal authority and professional management structures in place immediately to oversee the asset. While landlords focus on market fluctuations, The individual living inside the property represents the most significant variable in asset protection. If you have a long-term tenant with no formal agreement, you must act before you lose control of your asset. Protect your property by contacting Joel & Co. at 9349-2867 for a private consultation today.